Hi, welcome back to our studio, and thank you very much for all the questions that you sent over during our panel discussion. So actually, right now, we still have our three panelists. They are here live with us to answer any questions that you might have, and just want to remind you that you can still continue to send yours as the Q&A goes along. So I want to say good morning to Gerry, Annie, and Wendy. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi there.
All right, now I wanted to ask you guys, in your different corners around Singapore, wherever you're calling in from, the first question today comes from me. Agree or disagree? The best part about virtual events is that you can do Q&As from home. Is that true?
Oh, definitely.
Yes,
Definitely.
one of the big benefits. All right, now we do have some questions here today. First one, I believe, is directed at Gerry. This is for you. Wenchi asks, do you feel that online and home-based learning is going to be here to stay?
Probably, I think not in its entirety. I think everybody would like things to go back to the old way. So we may not have completely online learning, but I think what is important to realize is some of the things that we have learned during this pandemic situation with home-based learning, online learning, and all that. Some of the benefits definitely would still prevail, and I think we can still use some of those things. So things like Annie mentioned about polling, the interactive activities, gamification. I think all those are elements that surely can enhance learning in whichever format you have.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Next question comes from Jacqueline. Jacqueline, I believe this is for Wendy. So, Wendy, the question is on your end, in your personal opinion, have you leaned towards preferring live or recorded sessions for your MCs, if you could choose?
For virtual events itself, I would say I prefer live. I
Oh,
think the live element is actually quite important because you can pre-record a lot of things, but if you're doing like a Q&A session or if you're doing a live portion just before the links, then I think you need to be able to listen to what the person is saying and then reacting to it, right? And just say, thank you, Mr. Ho, and then continue with introducing next person, rather than it's like, oh, that was a very interesting point that Mr. Ho brought up, blah, 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 and then continue with the next link. So I think that I like the live thing a bit more. Of course, when you pre-record, you have a lot more control over lighting, how you sound. You don't like what the MC said, redo until you're happy, that kind of thing. So, there's a good and bad for both, but I prefer live.
and at this point, I'd like to say that was very interesting, Wendy, to show that I'm listening. See?
Yes, see, exactly. So you
Yeah.
can continue the conversation from there, right?
Right.
That's the whole life aspect that Gerry also mentioned, right, during the earlier session, that there's a lot of interaction that needs to be there when we are actually live in person.
Yeah, absolutely. The little moments that you miss if it's all pre-recorded. Thank you very much, Wendy.
Yeah.
So next question comes from Andrea. Andrea, thank you for your question. This is for Annie. So Annie, in your opinion, same question for Gerry. Do you personally see events staying online from your end of the business, or actually do you see a more hybrid version coming up in the next few years?
This is a good question. I think one thing to note is that virtual events and hybrid events they're not new to this time and age. They existed even before the pandemic. It just, because of what happened, it's just the timeline of adoption has been expedited. But definitely, I would see a lot more of a hybrid version coming up as kind of like quarantine controls kind of loosen up. And what I think would happen is that there will be a wider variety of types of events that we should be expecting. So, the definitions of what virtual is and what hybrid is going to start evolving, and the lines might actually start getting a bit more blurred because, like Gerry and Wendy said, there is a kind of like people are missing the human interaction, people are missing the kind of engagement, and what that engagement looks like is going to continue to evolve over time.
Absolutely. And I believe this might be our final question. We'll see. But this comes from Matthias. So, Matthias, this is for Gerry again. Gerry, do you have any tips to how you make online classes or courses more enjoyable if it's all virtual?
I think what we mentioned earlier about interactive exercises, the ability to convert what is normally a face-to-face activity into an online activity. Within SIT, not in my particular division, but in other divisions, they're already implementing gamification modules. There's one in allied health where they actually created a scenario of an accident in the lab. There was a fire, and subsequently, some of the people were injured. And what the students have to do is actually to go through it as a mystery solving puzzle to determine what were the causes of the fire, who was injured, and probably who was the culprit who started the fire. And from there, move on into a sort of a learning process and says, in future, if we were to have that kind of a situation, what would you do? So I think when we look into this, I've created one exercise before on a treasure hunt, which was actually meant for another module. And what the learners have to do is actually to look for the answers, and the answers are actually planted in various texts within the PowerPoint slide. So in a way, it forces them to go through the lesson, without me having to sort of provide the answers. So it's a little bit of challenge to see how else can we figure things out for these people.
Gerry, that was honestly a much more fun answer than I expected. I want to join your course now. I'll talk to you after this to find out how I can. And this next question comes from Kat. Thank you, Kat. I believe this is most relevant for Wendy. She asks, as a show caller, do you find it easier to show call for online or on-site events? That's interesting. And do they require the same skill sets, or is it very different these days?
I think it's very different actually, because online you really have whatever you just see in front of you. I mean, for us, it's whatever you're actually looking at on a screen, right? It's usually a 13-inch or 15-inch laptop kind of thing. But a live events, you can see really 360. You know when the dude there is sleeping on the back rows, or you see people walking in through the doors, you know it's going to slam. You can see a lot more things, you can hear a lot more things, you feel 360 rather than actually just from one camera angle, which is really all that you're actually interested in, because that camera angle is what goes to the audience, right? So I think I actually much prefer live events, but the difference is quite vast.
Well, that's interesting, Wendy, because I think I saw Annie laughing as you were explaining that. So I think it's because we all know that beyond our screens, all the mess of the house is there right now, and everything here is clean.
Oh, definitely.
But, yeah, that's another benefit of an online event. And Rochelle, this is directly for Annie. She asks, how is Pigeonhole's event tech solution different from some others that you've been seeing maybe on the market these days?
Okay. Well, that's a bit of a tough question because there are a lot of different types of event tech tools out there. Pigeonhole Live solutions are specifically made for audience interaction. So we are an audience interaction tool that uses interactive sessions like live Q&As, live polls, chats, and even quizzes, sort of like gamification that Gerry was talking about earlier, to enable meaningful conversations in different situations. So we're very customizable, I would say, that we can fit all sorts of different types of situations. So we do global town hall meetings to even classroom settings or virtual conferences and lead nurturing webinars. That's why we always encourage people who have specific event needs to come and talk to us specifically. Like if you have an image in mind, an idea in mind, and you're not sure how to execute your vision, you can come to us and we can advise you and even tailor a package for you to suit your needs.
Thank you very much, Annie. That's really useful. I think Rochelle might be your next client, so thank you for that. And last one is from Jasmine. This one, Jasmine says that this question is for all speakers, so please feel free to answer for everyone here. Her question is webinars versus dialogue sessions. What do you think between those two, webinars, dialogue sessions, what is the better choice for an online audience? Let's start off with maybe Gerry first.
I think it depends on the purpose of the particular event. Webinars will probably be more suited towards delivering of certain materials, certain information for maybe certain association professionals and all that. Dialogue, I think, is actually more of an sort of an interaction, especially when people want to see what is the reaction of a particular community to recent geopolitical events and so forth. So I think the dialogue part is good if you really want an updated information, whereas the other is actually to a large extent providing sort of a lot of information for, say, maybe a particular field or a particular discipline.
Right. Okay. And Wendy, what is your opinion on this?
You can tell I really like live more than anything else from the
Yeah.
conversations we've had. So I think I like the dialogue part because the dialogue part, like Gerry said, it's really present, it's very current. There is a bit more life to it than let me just give you a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I can Google anything right now. But usually I would much prefer to hear from the experts what they thought, and I think having the Q&A segment is very important because we don't know what you don't know or the audience doesn't know, right? So it's great when the audience comes with questions, and sometimes you're like, oh wow, okay, I never thought that was a problem, but obviously someone is having that problem, and that's why the question has come in. So I much prefer the whole dialogue portion of it because frankly, any PowerPoint presentation, just Google it.
Absolutely, and that's the difference between a YouTube video and what you guys are doing now. So thank you. And same question to Annie. Would you prefer a webinar or dialogue session?
Well, I'll definitely prefer a dialogue session just because I'm a huge advocate of like two-way conversations, two-way interactions instead of just a one-way. Like I'm sitting in front of a computer, staring at a video, talking at me. Like I love to have that interaction and even seeing like what kind of new interactions can come out of that. Like if people in the chat right now are having conversations of their own, they're having their own opinions about like what going virtual means to them or their personal experiences, that adds so much value. But at the same time, I think webinars can definitely have that interactive element if you have the right tools to go with it.
Absolutely, fair point. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Gerry, Wendy, and Annie for being with us this Friday morning. And thanks for everything that you've shared with our audience today.